The silence in the auditorium was deafening as Marcus Chen wheeled his daughter Sophia to the front of the packed technology conference. 300 of Silicon Valley's brightest minds watched as the 12-year-old girl's fingers danced across a peculiar keyboard that looked nothing like anything they'd ever seen. The device hummed softly, translating her touches into a symphony of tactile feedback that only she could understand. When Sophia finished her demonstration, typing a complex algorithm in seconds, the room erupted in stunned applause. But Marcus wasn't looking at the crowd. He was watching his daughter's face light up with the kind of joy he hadn't seen since before the accident 3 years ago. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 3 years earlier, Marcus Chen had been living a completely different life. As head of software development at Nexus Industries, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in Seattle, he commanded a team of 30 engineers and pulled in a salary that afforded his family a beautiful home in Bellevue, private schools for Sophia, and weekend trips to their cabin in the Cascades. His wife Elena worked as a pediatric surgeon at Seattle Children's Hospital, and together they represented the picture of modern success. Sophia had been their miracle child, born after years of fertility struggles, and she was everything they'd dreamed of. Brilliant beyond her years, curious about everything, with an infectious laugh that could brighten the darkest days. The accident happened on a Tuesday evening in October. Elena had been driving home from the hospital after a particularly long surgery when a drunk driver ran a red light at the intersection of Pine and 4th. The impact was devastating. Elena died instantly, her brilliant mind and healing hands lost in a moment of senseless tragedy. Sophia, who had been sleeping in the back seat, survived but suffered severe traumatic brain injury that damaged her optic nerves beyond repair. The doctors delivered the news with clinical precision. Sophia would live, but she would never see again. Marcus remembered sitting in that sterile hospital room, holding his daughter's small hand while she lay unconscious, machines beeping rhythmically around them. The grief was a physical thing, pressing down on his chest until he could barely breathe. Elena was gone, the love of his life, his partner and everything. And Sophia, his bright, curious little girl who loved to paint and read and watch the clouds change shapes, would wake up to a world of permanent darkness. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that mommy isn't coming home and that the colorful world she knew has disappeared forever? The months that followed blurred together in a haze of medical appointments, insurance battles, and crushing loneliness. Marcus took extended leave from Nexus, unable to concentrate on code when his daughter needed round-the-clock care. Sophia's adjustment to blindness was heartbreaking to witness. The confident, outgoing child who had been reading chapter books and solving math problems beyond her grade level became withdrawn and frustrated. Simple tasks that had once been automatic now required intense concentration and assistance. Getting dressed, finding her toys, navigating their own home became daily challenges that left both father and daughter exhausted. The traditional assistive technologies available to blind children felt woefully inadequate to Marcus's engineer mind. The Braille displays were clunky and expensive, often costing more than a car but offering limited functionality. The screen readers were slow and mechanical, turning the fluid experience of computing into a tedious exercise in patience. Watching Sophia struggle with these devices, seeing her frustration as she tried to keep up with her peers in online classes, Marcus felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about learning to live with blindness. This was about ensuring that his daughter could still reach her full potential in a world that increasingly demanded technological literacy. Late at night, after Sophia had gone to bed, Marcus began sketching designs in his notebook. What if tactile feedback could be more intuitive? What if blind users could feel the structure of code, the architecture of websites, the flow of data? His background in haptic technology from his early days at Microsoft came flooding back. He remembered projects that had been shelved for being too experimental, too far ahead of their time. But time had caught up, and more importantly, he now had the most compelling reason in the world to make the impossible possible. Dr. Sarah Kim worked in the Assistive Technology Lab at the University of Washington, specializing in human-computer interaction for people with disabilities. Her research focused on multi-sensory computing interfaces, exploring how touch, sound, and even smell could be integrated to create richer digital experiences for users with visual impairments. She'd published dozens of papers that Marcus had devoured during his late-night research sessions, But her work remained largely theoretical, trapped in academic journals and prototype demonstrations that never made it to market. Sarah's interest in assistive technology wasn't purely academic. Her younger brother David had been born with congenital blindness, and she'd grown up watching him navigate a world designed for sighted people. Despite his intelligence and determination, David constantly bumped against technological barriers that seemed unnecessary to Sarah's engineer mind. Why should accessing a computer be so much more difficult for blind users? Why did assistive devices cost 10 times more than mainstream technology while offering a fraction of the functionality? These questions had driven her to pursue her PhD and dedicate her career to finding better solutions. The breakthrough in Sarah's research had come 2 years earlier, when she developed a new type of haptic feedback system that could simulate texture, temperature, and even air pressure through ultrasonic waves. Unlike traditional vibration-based systems, her technology could create the sensation of touching virtual objects with startling realism. Users could feel the difference between rough and smooth surfaces, distinguish between hot and cold objects, even sense the weight and density of digital items. The implications for blind users were staggering. But like so many academic innovations, Sarah's work languished in the lab, lacking the funding and engineering resources needed to transform prototypes into practical products. Sarah's personal life had been shaped by her dedication to her research and her family's needs. She'd never married, choosing instead to focus on her work and helping care for David, who lived in a group home nearby. Her colleagues often remarked on her singular focus, her ability to see possibilities where others saw insurmountable challenges. Sarah believed that technology should enhance human capability, not create new barriers, and she was willing to work 18-hour days to make that vision a reality. The email arrived in Sarah's inbox on a rainy Thursday morning in March. The sender was listed as Marcus Chen, and the subject line read, "Revolutionary tactile computing for my blind daughter." Sarah received dozens of emails from desperate parents seeking solutions for their children, and she usually responded with gentle explanations of why her research wasn't ready for practical application. But something about Marcus's message made her pause. He wasn't asking for existing solutions or quick fixes. Instead, he was proposing a collaboration, offering his software engineering expertise to help bring her haptic research into the real world. Marcus had spent weeks crafting that email, explaining Sophia's situation, his own technical background, and his vision for a new kind of computer interface that would make digital technology as accessible to blind users as it was to sighted ones. He'd included detailed sketches of his ideas, showing how Sarah's haptic feedback system could be integrated with dynamic. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Braille displays, spatial audio, and predictive text systems to create something unprecedented. The email was equal parts technical proposal and father's plea, a combination that Sarah found impossible to ignore. Their first meeting took place in Sarah's lab on a Saturday afternoon. Marcus brought Sophia with him, partly because he couldn't afford childcare, and partly because he wanted Sarah to see exactly who they were working for. Sophia was 11 then, still adjusting to her blindness but showing flashes of her old curiosity when presented with new technologies. Sarah watched as the girl explored the lab's various prototypes, her fingers moving with surprising confidence across unfamiliar surfaces. Sarah's haptic demonstration left both Marcus and Sophia speechless. When Sophia placed her hands on the ultrasonic array and suddenly felt virtual raindrops falling on her palms, she gasped with delight. The sensation was so realistic that she looked up at Marcus with wonder, asking if it was really raining inside the lab. For the first time since the accident, Marcus saw his daughter's face light up with genuine excitement about technology, rather than frustration with its limitations. The collaboration that emerged from that meeting was unlike anything either Marcus or Sarah had experienced before. Marcus quit his job at Nexus, using his savings and Elena's life insurance money to fund their research partnership. Sarah took a sabbatical from the university, moving her most promising prototypes to Marcus's home workshop. They worked with an intensity born of desperation and hope, spending 18-hour days designing, building, and testing new interfaces, while Sophia attended school online. The technical challenges were immense. Creating a tactile computer interface wasn't just about adding vibrations to existing technology. It required rethinking fundamental assumptions about how humans interact with digital information. Traditional graphical user interfaces relied on visual metaphors, windows, icons, menus, that had no meaning in a tactile world. Marcus and Sarah had to develop an entirely new language of touch, a system of textures, temperatures, and spatial relationships that could convey complex information through fingertips alone. Sophia became their most important collaborator and harshest critic. Every prototype had to pass her usability test, and she was ruthlessly honest about what worked and what didn't. The early versions were disasters, creating sensory overload that left her confused and frustrated. But gradually, through hundreds of iterations and late-night debugging sessions, they began to create something magical, a keyboard that could change its texture to indicate different types of information, a screen that painted pictures in touch rather than light, a system that could make the abstract concepts of programming and mathematics feel as tangible as building blocks. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night in December, almost exactly 1 year after Marcus and Sarah had started working together. Sophia was testing their latest prototype, a system they dubbed touch code, when something clicked. She wasn't just using the interface, she was playing with it, exploring digital spaces with the same confidence she'd once brought to physical playgrounds. Her fingers flew across the haptic display as she wrote a simple program to create digital art, something that should have been impossible for a blind child but felt natural with their revolutionary interface. Marcus watched his daughter work, tears streaming down his face. This wasn't just about assistive technology anymore. Sophia wasn't just keeping up with her sighted peers. She was discovering new ways of understanding and manipulating digital information that her classmates couldn't even imagine. The interface they'd created didn't just accommodate blindness. It revealed new possibilities that no one had ever considered. News of their breakthrough began to spread through the assistive technology community, then beyond into mainstream tech circles. Videos of Sophia using touch code went viral, showing a blind 12-year-old programming with a fluidity that amazed seasoned developers. Accessibility advocates hailed it as a revolutionary advance, while computer scientists marveled at the innovative interface design. Marcus and Sarah found themselves fielding calls from researchers, journalists, and venture capitalists who wanted to understand how they'd achieved the impossible. The attention was overwhelming for Marcus, who'd spent the past 3 years focused solely on Sophia's needs rather than his own career. He'd used up most of his savings funding the research, living on a shoestring budget while pouring everything into developing touch code. The prototype that worked so beautifully for Sophia was still far from being a commercial product. They needed manufacturing partners, regulatory approval, and millions of dollars in development funding to bring their innovation to market. Sarah faced her own pressures as the university began demanding that she return to her teaching responsibilities or forfeit her position permanently. The academic world moved slowly, publishing papers and attending conferences while real-world problems remained unsolved. Her collaboration with Marcus had produced more practical innovation in 18 months than her previous 5 years of traditional research, but it didn't fit neatly into the university's expectations for faculty productivity. The first approach came from Apex Technologies, a major hardware manufacturer known for their gaming peripherals and specialized input devices. Their representatives were impressed by TouchCode's technical sophistication and saw potential for expanding into the assistive technology market. They offered Marcus and Sarah a licensing deal worth $2 million upfront, plus royalties on future sales. It seemed like the answer to their prayers, a way to bring TouchCode to market while securing financial stability for Sophia's future. But as Marcus and Sarah dug deeper into Apex's proposal, red flags began to emerge. The company wanted to simplify TouchCode, removing many of its most innovative features to reduce manufacturing costs. They planned to price the final product at over $15,000, making it accessible only to the wealthiest families or those lucky enough to have premium insurance coverage. Most troubling of all, Apex wanted to acquire all intellectual property rights, meaning Marcus and Sarah would have no control over future development or pricing decisions. The choice felt impossible. Marcus desperately needed the money, not just for Sophia's current needs, but for the specialized education and support she'd require as she grew older. Sarah's research career hung in the balance, and without significant funding, TouchCode would remain a brilliant prototype gathering dust in Marcus's workshop. But accepting Apex's offer would mean betraying everything they'd worked for, turning their labor of love into just another expensive gadget that most blind children would never be able to afford. The decision became even more complicated when other offers began arriving. VisionSoft, a company specializing in screen reader software, proposed a partnership that would integrate TouchCode's haptic feedback into their existing product line. Tech Giant Corporation, one of the world's largest technology companies, expressed interest in acquiring Marcus and Sarah's entire operation, offering them positions in their accessibility research division, along with a substantial acquisition price. Each offer represented a different compromise, a different vision of what TouchCode could become. Some promised wider distribution, but limited innovation. Others offered generous compensation, but little guarantee that the technology would ever reach the children who needed it most. Marcus found himself lying awake at night, weighing financial security against his original mission, wondering what Elena would have advised if she were still alive to help him navigate these impossible choices. Sophia, now 12 and increasingly aware of the adult world's complexities, began asking pointed questions about their future. She understood that TouchCode was special, that it had changed her life in ways that went far beyond simple accessibility. But she also sensed the stress that Marcus tried to hide, the weight of decisions that would determine not just their financial future, but the fate of technology that could help thousands of other blind children. The technology conference in San Francisco was supposed to be a simple demonstration, a chance for Marcus to show TouchCode to potential partners in a neutral setting. He'd spent weeks preparing Sophia for the presentation, knowing that her natural confidence and enthusiasm would be more persuasive than any technical specifications he could recite. What he hadn't expected was the response from the audience, the gasps of amazement, as Sophia effortlessly navigated complex programming tasks that stumped many adult developers. As the demonstration concluded and the applause died down, Marcus noticed movement in the back of the auditorium. Representatives from several major technology companies were making their way toward the stage, business cards and offers ready. But there was also something else. Families with blind children, teachers from schools for the visually impaired, researchers who'd been working on similar problems for years. The technology that had started as one father's desperate attempt to help his daughter had become something much larger, a beacon of hope for an entire community that had been underserved by mainstream technology. Dr. Jennifer Walsh approached Marcus during the conference break, her card identifying her as Chief Technology Officer at Quantum Dynamics, a company Marcus had heard of but never imagined would be interested in assistive technology. Jennifer was different from the other corporate representatives, asking detailed technical questions about TouchCode's architecture rather than immediately launching into acquisition discussions. Her interest seemed genuine, rooted in understanding rather than opportunism. Jennifer's own story emerged during their conversation. Her son Michael had been diagnosed with a rare genetic condition that would eventually rob him of his sight, though he was currently in the early stages of vision loss. She'd been following assistive technology research for months, hoping to find solutions that would help Michael maintain his independence as his condition progressed. TouchCode represented exactly the kind of breakthrough she'd been searching for, technology that didn't just accommodate disability, but transformed it into a different kind of capability. Quantum Dynamics wasn't just another tech company looking to diversify their product portfolio. They'd been quietly building an accessibility research division, recruiting top talent from universities and established companies to work on next-generation assistive technologies. Jennifer's team had the resources to bring TouchCode to market quickly and the commitment to keep it affordable. More importantly, they shared Marcus and Sarah's vision of technology that enhanced human potential rather than simply compensating for limitations. The offer that Jennifer presented was unlike anything Marcus had received before. Instead of a simple licensing deal or acquisition, Quantum Dynamics proposed a true partnership. Marcus and Sarah would retain significant equity in TouchCode while gaining access to world-class manufacturing capabilities, regulatory expertise, and global distribution networks. The company committed to pricing the technology at cost for schools and low-income families, ensuring that financial barriers wouldn't prevent children from accessing the tools they needed. But the most remarkable aspect of Quantum's proposal wasn't financial. They wanted Marcus and Sarah to lead a new division focused entirely on accessibility innovation, with Sophia serving as a paid consultant and tester for future products. The arrangement would allow them to continue pushing the boundaries of assistive technology while building a sustainable business that could help millions of people worldwide. As Marcus read through the proposal in his hotel room that night, Sophia curled up beside him working on her laptop with touch code. He felt something he hadn't experienced since Elena's death. Hope for a future that extended beyond mere survival. The technology they'd created out of desperation and love could become the foundation for transforming how society thought about disability and capability. The other companies didn't give up easily. Tech giants sweetened their offer, adding stock options and guarantees about continued development. Apex returned with a revised proposal that addressed some of Marcus's concerns about accessibility and pricing. VisionSoft suggested a joint venture that would combine their established market presence with TouchCode's innovative interface design. Each offer forced Marcus to confront fundamental questions about his priorities and values. Financial security was important, especially with Sophia's long-term care needs to consider. But he learned through 3 years of struggle that some things mattered more than money. The joy on his daughter's face when she mastered a new programming concept. The excited emails from other parents whose children had tried touchcode prototypes. The possibility that their work could prevent other families from experiencing the isolation and limitation that had defined their journey. Sarah faced her own moment of reckoning as the university's deadline for her return approached. Her department chair had made it clear that continuing her collaboration with Marcus would mean foregoing tenure-track consideration, potentially ending her academic career before it truly began. But the work they'd accomplished together had been more fulfilling than any theoretical research she'd ever conducted. TouchCode represented everything she'd hoped to achieve when she'd first entered the field of assistive technology. The decision came during a family dinner with Sophia's grandparents, Elena's parents, who'd been pillars of support throughout their ordeal. As Sophia demonstrated TouchCode's latest features, explaining complex programming concepts with the enthusiasm of a child showing off a new toy, Marcus's father-in-law asked a simple question. What would Elena want you to do? The answer came immediately, without hesitation or doubt. Elena had always believed that their talents and opportunities came with responsibilities to help others. She'd chosen pediatric surgery despite more lucrative specialties because she wanted to heal children. She'd volunteered at free clinics and supported medical missions to underserved communities. Elena would have wanted TouchCode to reach every child who could benefit from it, regardless of their family's ability to pay. Marcus called Jennifer Walsh the next morning, accepting quantum dynamics. Partnership offer. Sarah submitted her resignation to the university the same day, ready to transition from academic research to real-world impact. Together, they prepared to embark on the next phase of their journey, scaling their innovation from a prototype that helped one remarkable girl to a platform that could transform millions of lives. The press conference announcing the partnership took place 6 months later in Quantum Dynamics headquarters, a gleaming facility in Austin that would soon house the world's most advanced assistive technology research lab. Marcus stood at the podium, Sophia beside him demonstrating TouchCode for an audience of journalists, investors, and advocates. But the real audience was watching via livestream. Thousands of families around the world who'd been following their story and waiting for news about when TouchCode would become available. The announcement exceeded everyone's expectations. Quantum Dynamics committed to shipping the first commercial TouchCode units within 18 months, priced at under $3,000 with substantial discounts available for schools and low-income families. They revealed plans for a comprehensive ecosystem of tactile computing tools, from basic literacy devices for young children to advanced programming interfaces for professional developers. Most remarkably, they announced the establishment of a $50 million foundation dedicated to ensuring that no child would be denied access to TouchCode due to financial constraints. The partnership also included provisions for open-source development, allowing other researchers and companies to build upon TouchCode's innovations. Marcus and Sarah had learned from the history of assistive technology, where proprietary systems often became expensive dead ends. By opening their platform to broader collaboration, they hoped to accelerate innovation and prevent the stagnation that had plagued the field for decades. As the press conference concluded and reporters rushed to file their stories, Marcus found himself standing in the hallway outside the auditorium, watching Sophia explain TouchCode to a group of fascinated engineers. 3 years ago, she'd been a grieving child, struggling to navigate a world that suddenly seemed impossibly complex. Now she was a confident young woman, comfortable in her own skin and excited about possibilities that most people couldn't even imagine. The journey from that sterile hospital room to this moment of triumph had been longer and more difficult than Marcus could have anticipated. There had been nights when he'd questioned whether he was doing the right thing, whether his obsession with technology was helping Sophia or preventing her from accepting her blindness. There had been mornings when the weight of responsibility felt crushing, when the technical challenges seemed insurmountable, and the financial pressures threatened to destroy everything they'd built. But standing there in quantum dynamics headquarters, watching his daughter confidently discuss the future of assistive technology with some of the world's brightest engineers, Marcus knew that every sacrifice had been worthwhile. TouchCode wasn't just a product or a business opportunity. It was proof that love combined with determination could overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. It was evidence that disability didn't have to mean limitation, that different ways of experiencing the world could lead to innovations that benefited everyone. Sophia looked up from her conversation and caught Marcus's eye, giving him the smile that had sustained him through the darkest moments of their journey. In that smile, he saw Elena's strength and optimism, his own stubborn refusal to accept defeat, and something entirely new, a confidence that came from knowing she could shape the world rather than simply endure it. The future stretched ahead of them, full of challenges and opportunities they couldn't yet imagine. TouchCode would continue evolving, reaching more children and opening new possibilities for tactile computing. Marcus and Sarah would lead teams of researchers pushing the boundaries of human-computer interaction. Sophia would grow up in a world where her blindness was simply one characteristic among many, not a defining limitation. As they left the building that evening, walking into the Austin sunset, Marcus reflected on the strange ways that tragedy could transform into triumph. Elena's death had been senseless, devastating in ways that still took his breath away. Sophia's blindness had initially seemed like a cruel addition to an already unbearable loss. But from that darkness had emerged something beautiful and powerful, technology that would ensure no other child faced the barriers that Sophia had overcome. The TouchCode story was far from over. In laboratories and classrooms around the world, researchers would build upon their innovations. Thousands of children would discover new ways of interacting with digital technology. Entrepreneurs would launch companies based on tactile computing principles. Teachers would develop new methods for engaging students with different learning styles. The ripple effects would spread far beyond the assistive technology community, influencing mainstream interface design and expanding everyone's understanding of human-computer interaction possibilities. But at its heart, TouchCode would always be about a father's love for his daughter, a researcher's commitment to meaningful change, and a remarkable girl's refusal to let blindness define her potential. Their story proved that innovation born from necessity and nurtured by determination could transform not just individual lives, but entire industries and communities. As Marcus tucked Sophia into bed that night in their hotel room, she asked him about the next day's schedule, excited about visiting quantum dynamics, research labs, and meeting the team that would help bring TouchCode to children around the world. Her enthusiasm reminded him of Elena's optimism, the belief that tomorrow would always bring new possibilities for healing and growth. Marcus kissed his daughter goodnight and settled into the chair beside her bed, watching the city lights twinkle through their window. Somewhere out there, other families were facing their own crises, their own moments of despair and hope. Some would find the strength to transform their challenges into opportunities. Others would need help from innovations like TouchCode, tools that could bridge the gap between limitation and possibility. The journey that had begun with tragedy and loss had become something neither Marcus nor Sarah could have anticipated when they first met in that university lab. They'd set out to solve one girl's problems and ended up creating solutions that would benefit millions. They'd started with a father's desperate love and built a movement that would change how society understood the relationship between technology and human potential. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to extend TouchCode's reach and impact. But tonight, Marcus was content to sit in the darkness, listening to his daughter's peaceful breathing and thinking about the extraordinary path that had brought them to this moment of possibility and promise. The manufacturing floor at Quantum Dynamics hummed with activity as teams of engineers worked around the clock to transform TouchCode from breakthrough prototype to commercial reality. Marcus walked through the facility at dawn, marveling at the sophisticated equipment that would soon be producing thousands of tactile computing devices. The injection molding machines stood ready to create the specialized haptic arrays, while precision assembly stations waited to integrate Sarah's ultrasonic feedback systems with Marcus's adaptive interface software. 6 months had passed since the partnership announcement, and the pressure to deliver was immense. Pre-orders had flooded in from schools, rehabilitation centers, and families around the world, creating a backlog that would take years to fulfill at current production capacity. The technical challenges of mass production had proven even more complex than Marcus anticipated. Each touch code unit required hundreds of precisely calibrated components, from the microscopic actuators that created tactile sensations to the specialized processors that translated digital information into touch-based experiences. Sarah spent her days troubleshooting manufacturing defects that hadn't appeared in their hand-built prototypes. The ultrasonic arrays that worked perfectly in laboratory conditions were sensitive to temperature variations, humidity levels, and electromagnetic interference that pervaded the factory environment. Each adjustment required extensive testing and recalibration, a process that could take weeks to perfect. The pressure was exhausting, but Sarah drew energy from the emails arriving daily from parents desperate to get touch code for their children. Sophia had adapted to her new role as chief product tester with characteristic determination. Now 13, she possessed an intuitive understanding of touch code's capabilities that amazed even its creators. Her afternoons were spent in Quantum's user experience lab, working with prototypes that pushed the boundaries of tactile computing. The latest iteration could simulate textures so realistic that users could distinguish between different types of fabric, identify the grain of various woods, and even feel the difference between smooth glass and polished metal through digital touch alone. The breakthrough that had eluded them for months came during an unexpected late-night session. Marcus had been struggling with touch code's response time, trying to reduce the lag between user input and haptic feedback to make the interface feel truly instantaneous. Traditional processing approaches created delays that made the system feel sluggish, breaking the illusion of natural interaction that was essential for user acceptance. Sophia had been working on a programming assignment when she noticed something peculiar about touch code's behavior. The system seemed to anticipate her inputs, providing feedback slightly before she completed certain gestures. At first, Marcus dismissed this as imagination, but when he examined the data logs, he discovered that touch code's machine learning algorithms had begun predicting user intentions based on subtle patterns in touch pressure, finger positioning, and movement velocity. This accidental discovery opened entirely new possibilities for tactile computing. Instead of simply responding to completed gestures, touch code could begin preparing feedback as users initiated movements, creating an experience that felt more responsive than any traditional interface. The predictive algorithms also enabled new forms of interaction, allowing users to communicate with the system through barely perceptible changes in touch pressure or finger positioning that would be invisible to outside observers. The implications extended far beyond assistive technology. Military applications could allow soldiers to control equipment through subtle gestures that wouldn't reveal their positions to enemies. Medical devices could respond to patients' needs before they fully articulated them. Educational tools could adapt to students' learning patterns in real time, providing customized feedback that optimized comprehension and retention. Dr. Amanda Foster arrived at Quantum Dynamics on a gray Tuesday morning in November, her credentials marking her as one of the world's leading experts in neural interface technology. Amanda's research at Stanford had focused on brain-computer interfaces, exploring how thoughts could be translated directly into digital commands without any physical interaction. Her work had been largely theoretical until recent advances in neural signal processing made practical applications feasible. Amanda's interest in touch code stemmed from her brother's experience with spinal cord injury. James had been paralyzed in a climbing accident 5 years earlier, losing the use of his hands along with his legs. Traditional assistive technologies required physical movements that James could no longer perform, leaving him dependent on voice commands and eye-tracking systems that were slow and unreliable. Touch code's predictive capabilities suggested possibilities for interfaces that could respond to attempted movements rather than completed ones. The collaboration between Amanda and the touch code team began cautiously. Neural interface technology raised profound ethical questions about privacy, consent, and the boundaries between human thoughts and digital systems. Amanda had spent years developing protocols to ensure that brain-computer interfaces enhanced human capability without compromising autonomy or exposing users to manipulation. Their first experiments were remarkably successful. By placing neural sensors on James's scalp and connecting them to touch code's predictive algorithms, They created a system that could interpret his intended hand movements and translate them into tactile feedback that he could feel through his remaining sensation in his arms. For the first time since his accident, James could interact with digital technology through something approaching natural gesture, even though his hands couldn't actually move. The neural touch code prototype represented a convergence of technologies that had been developing independently for decades. Brain-computer interfaces had struggled with the complexity of translating neural signals into useful digital commands. Tactile computing had been limited by the need for physical interaction. By combining these approaches, Amanda and the touch code team created something unprecedented. A system that could bridge the gap between thought and digital experience for users with severe physical limitations. News of their breakthrough spread quickly through the medical and technology communities. Researchers who had been working on similar problems for years suddenly found themselves collaborating on refinements and applications they'd never imagined possible. The Department of Veterans Affairs expressed immediate interest in neural touch code for wounded soldiers. The National Institutes of Health funded a comprehensive study of its potential applications for stroke recovery and traumatic brain injury rehabilitation. But with recognition came new pressures and complications. Competing technology companies began developing their own versions of neural tactile interfaces, hoping to capture market share in what analysts predicted would become a multi-billion-dollar industry. Patent disputes emerged as various organizations claimed ownership of fundamental technologies underlying touch code's innovations. Regulatory agencies struggled to develop safety standards for devices that interfaced directly with the human nervous system. Marcus found himself navigating a world far more complex than the focused research environment where touch code had been born. Business development meetings consumed hours that he'd rather spend in the lab. Legal consultations replaced technical discussions as patent attorneys dissected every aspect of their innovations. Investment presentations demanded simplified explanations of technologies that had taken years to develop and understand. The most challenging aspect of touch code's success was managing the expectations of desperate families who saw it as a miracle cure for their children's disabilities. Parents called daily requesting early access to prototypes, often describing heartbreaking situations where traditional assistive technologies had failed their children. Marcus struggled with the knowledge that every day of delay meant continued isolation and limitation for children who could benefit from touch code. But rushing to market with inadequately tested technology could cause more harm than good. Sarah established a beta testing program that carefully selected families to work with pre-release touch code units. The selection process was agonizing, choosing 30 children from thousands of applicants, based on criteria that balanced research needs with potential benefit. Each beta family received extensive training and support, becoming partners in touch code's development rather than simply end users of finished technology. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Children who had struggled with traditional Braille displays mastered touch code within days. Students who had been falling behind in computer science classes suddenly found themselves excelling as touch code's tactile programming environment made abstract concepts tangible. Most remarkably, several beta testers began creating their own touch code applications, developing games and educational tools that leveraged tactile feedback in ways the original designers hadn't considered. 12-year-old Alex Rodriguez became touch code's youngest application developer, creating a tactile mathematics program that helped blind students visualize geometric concepts through touch. His work was so innovative that Quantum Dynamics hired him as a junior consultant, making Alex one of the youngest professional software developers in the company's history. Alex's success inspired other young users to explore touch code's programming capabilities, creating a community of tactile developers who shared techniques and collaborated on projects through specialized online forums. The beta testing program also revealed unexpected challenges that hadn't appeared in controlled laboratory conditions. Touch code's sensitivity to environmental factors meant that performance varied significantly between different locations and seasons. The devices worked perfectly in climate-controlled schools, but struggled in humid environments or areas with high electromagnetic interference. Some users experienced fatigue from prolonged tactile stimulation, requiring software modifications to prevent overstimulation while maintaining functionality. Dr. Michael Cheng joined the touch code team as lead human factors engineer, bringing expertise in ergonomics and user experience design that proved essential for addressing these real-world challenges. Michael's background included years designing interfaces for high-stress environments like aircraft cockpits and surgical suites, where user fatigue could have catastrophic consequences. His modifications to TouchCode's feedback algorithms significantly reduced user fatigue while actually improving the clarity and precision of tactile sensations. The regulatory approval process proved more complex than anyone had anticipated. The Food and Drug Administration struggled to categorize TouchCode, which didn't fit neatly into existing device classifications. Traditional computer peripherals required minimal safety testing, but TouchCode's direct neural interface capabilities triggered medical device regulations that could take years to navigate. The ultrasonic haptic feedback raised questions about long-term exposure effects that would require extensive clinical studies to resolve. Jennifer Walsh found herself spending more time in Washington than Austin, working with regulatory agencies to develop appropriate safety standards for neural tactile interfaces. The process was frustrating but necessary, establishing precedents that would govern the entire emerging industry. Jennifer's background in both technology and policy proved invaluable, allowing her to translate complex technical concepts into language that regulators could understand and evaluate. European and Asian markets presented additional regulatory challenges, with each region maintaining different standards for both medical devices and computer equipment. Quantum Dynamics established international partnerships to navigate these requirements, working with local companies that understood regional regulatory environments. The global expansion strategy required careful balance between maintaining TouchCode's technical integrity and adapting to diverse market requirements. Manufacturing capacity became a critical bottleneck as demand continued exceeding production capability. The specialized components required for TouchCode couldn't be sourced from traditional electronics suppliers, requiring Quantum Dynamics to develop entire new supply chains. The ultrasonic actuators that created tactile sensations required precision manufacturing capabilities that existed in only a handful of facilities worldwide. The neural interface sensors demanded cleanroom production environments typically reserved for medical implants. Marcus made the difficult decision to license TouchCode's core technologies to other manufacturers, trading exclusivity for production capacity. Carefully selected partners in Japan, Germany, and South Korea received rights to manufacture TouchCode components under strict quality control requirements. This approach accelerated global availability while maintaining the technical standards essential for user safety and satisfaction. The first commercial TouchCode units shipped 18 months after the Quantum Dynamics partnership announcement, exactly on the schedule Jennifer had promised during that first press conference. Marcus and Sophia were present at the Austin facility when the first production unit rolled off the assembly line, a moment that felt simultaneously triumphant and anticlimactic. After years of intense development and testing, TouchCode was finally ready to begin changing lives on a global scale. Launch day brought a carefully orchestrated marketing campaign that emphasized TouchCode's practical benefits rather than its technological sophistication. Videos showed children using TouchCode for homework, teens programming their own applications, and adults accessing professional software with unprecedented fluidity. The message was clear. TouchCode didn't just accommodate blindness. It transformed the digital experience for visually impaired users in ways that often surpassed what sighted users could achieve. Pre-orders sold out within hours, creating a waiting list that stretched into the following year. Educational institutions placed bulk orders for entire computer labs. Rehabilitation hospitals requested TouchCode units for their assistive technology training programs. Individual families from around the world submitted orders accompanied by heartfelt letters describing their children's needs and dreams. The early user reviews were overwhelmingly positive, but they also revealed usage patterns that surprised TouchCode's creators. Many users spent hours exploring the system's capabilities rather than using it for specific tasks, discovering new ways to interact with digital information that hadn't been anticipated during development. Children created tactile art, using TouchCode's drawing applications, producing works that conveyed texture and movement in ways that visual art couldn't achieve. Professional software developers began adapting their applications for TouchCode, creating specialized versions that leveraged tactile feedback for enhanced functionality. Code editors highlighted syntax errors through texture changes. Spreadsheet applications represented data relationships through spatial audio and haptic patterns. Web browsers transformed HTML structures into navigable tactile environments that made website architecture tangible. The TouchCode developer community grew rapidly as programmers discovered the unique possibilities offered by tactile interfaces. Online forums buzzed with discussions of best practices for haptic user experience design. Conferences dedicated to tactile computing emerged, bringing together researchers, developers, and users to share innovations and collaborate on future directions. Sophia's role evolved from product tester to community advocate, as she began speaking at conferences and workshops about her experience with touchcode. Her presentations combined technical depth with personal insight, explaining how tactile computing had transformed her relationship with technology and education. At 14, she possessed a unique perspective on both the possibilities and limitations of assistive technology, making her a compelling spokesperson for touchcode's benefits. The success of touchcode's initial release validated the decision to prioritize affordability and accessibility over maximum profit margins. Schools and low-income families could obtain touchcode units at substantially reduced prices, ensuring that financial barriers didn't prevent children from accessing the technology. The Touchcode Foundation provided grants to organizations serving underserved communities, expanding access to populations that traditional assistive technology companies had largely ignored. International expansion accelerated as regulatory approvals came through in major markets. The European launch was particularly successful, with several countries incorporating touchcode into their national curricula for visually impaired students. Japan's aging population created unexpected demand for touchcode among elderly users experiencing vision loss, leading to specialized applications designed for seniors transitioning to tactile computing. Research partnerships with universities around the world generated continuous improvements to touchcode's capabilities. Advances in machine learning enabled more sophisticated predictive algorithms. Materials science breakthroughs produced lighter, more durable haptic arrays. Neuroscience research revealed new possibilities for brain-computer integration that could expand touchcode's applications beyond visual impairment to other neurological conditions. The competitive landscape evolved rapidly as other companies recognized the potential of tactile computing. Some competitors focused on lower-cost alternatives that sacrificed functionality for affordability. Others pursued high-end professional applications with enhanced capabilities but limited accessibility. A few companies attempted direct copies of touchcode's technology, leading to patent disputes that would take years to resolve through the courts. Marcus found himself balancing multiple responsibilities as touchcode's profile continued growing. Media interviews demanded time that he preferred spending with Sophia or in the lab. Industry conferences required presentations about touchcode's future development when he was still learning about its current applications. Investment meetings focused on financial projections rather than the human impact that had motivated touchcode's creation. The most rewarding aspect of touchcode's success remained the letters and videos from families whose lives had been transformed by the technology. Parents described children who had regained confidence in their academic abilities. Teachers reported improved engagement from visually impaired students who could finally participate fully in computer-based activities. Adults shared stories of career opportunities that had become accessible through touchcode's professional applications. Dr. Lisa Park joined Quantum Dynamics as Director of Research and Development, bringing expertise in scaling innovative technologies from startup concepts to global platforms. Lisa's experience at major technology companies provided crucial insight into managing rapid growth while maintaining innovation momentum. Her first priority was establishing research priorities that balanced immediate user needs with long-term technological possibilities. Under Lisa's leadership, the Touchcode research team expanded beyond assistive technology into applications that could benefit all users. Early experiments suggested that tactile feedback could enhance spatial reasoning abilities, improve memory retention, and provide new ways of understanding complex data relationships. The possibility that touchcode could expand human cognitive capabilities rather than simply compensating for sensory limitations opened entirely new market opportunities. The neural interface research progressed from experimental prototypes to clinical trials, as Amanda's team refined their brain-computer integration techniques. Early results suggested that touchcode's neural interfaces could help stroke patients recover lost motor functions, provide new communication methods for individuals with severe speech impairments, and even enhance cognitive performance in users without disabilities. Ethical considerations became increasingly important as touchcode's capabilities expanded beyond assistive technology into human enhancement applications. The company established an ethics board, including philosophers, disability rights advocates, and technology policy experts, to guide development decisions and ensure that touchcode's evolution served human flourishing rather than creating new forms of inequality or dependence. Sophia's 15th birthday was celebrated at Quantum Dynamics headquarters, with the entire TouchCode team gathering to honor the young woman whose needs had inspired their breakthrough innovation. The celebration was bittersweet, marking both personal milestone and professional achievement while acknowledging the challenges that lay ahead. TouchCode had exceeded everyone's expectations for impact and adoption, but success brought new responsibilities and pressures that tested the team's original vision. As the celebration wound down and colleagues departed, Marcus and Sophia walked through the research labs where TouchCode had been refined and perfected. The spaces buzzed with activity as new projects pushed the boundaries of tactile computing into uncharted territories. Young researchers worked alongside experienced engineers, united by shared commitment to expanding human possibility through innovative technology. Sophia paused at the prototype area where the first TouchCode units had been assembled by hand, remembering the excitement and uncertainty of those early experiments. The journey from desperate father's hope to global technology platform had been longer and more complex than anyone had imagined, but it had also been more rewarding than the most optimistic projections had suggested. Looking ahead, the possibilities seemed limitless. TouchCode had proven that assistive technology could transcend accommodation to become enhancement, that solutions designed for specific disabilities could benefit entire populations, and that innovation driven by love and necessity could transform industries and societies. The future would bring new challenges and opportunities that none of them could fully anticipate, but they faced that uncertainty with confidence born from experience and success. Marcus placed his hand on Sophia's shoulder as they stood together in the lab where their lives had been transformed. Tomorrow would bring new developments, new users discovering TouchCode's capabilities, new applications that pushed tactile computing into unexplored territories. But tonight, surrounded by the humming equipment and blinking indicators of ongoing research, they savored the quiet satisfaction of knowing they had kept their promise to Elena and to themselves. They had turned tragedy into triumph, limitation into possibility, and individual need into universal benefit. The auditorium at the Global Technology Summit fell silent as tech industry leaders from around the world gathered for what many considered the most anticipated announcement of the decade. 5 years had passed since TouchCode's initial release, and the platform had evolved far beyond its origins as assistive technology for blind children. Marcus stood at the podium, no longer the desperate father seeking solutions for his daughter, but the visionary leader of a movement that had redefined human-computer interaction. Behind him, a massive screen displayed testimonials from TouchCode users across 6 continents. A surgeon in Tokyo described performing complex operations with haptic guidance that allowed her to feel tissue density through robotic instruments. A composer in Vienna explained how tactile music notation had revolutionized his creative process, enabling him to sculpt sound with his fingertips. An astronaut aboard the International Space Station demonstrated TouchCode's zero-gravity interface, which had become essential for spacecraft operations where traditional visual displays were impractical. Sophia, now 18 and preparing for college, sat in the front row alongside Sarah, Amanda, and the expanded team that had transformed TouchCode from prototype to global platform. The young woman who had once struggled with basic computer tasks now served as Chief Innovation Officer for Quantum Dynamics, Accessibility Division, her unique perspective guiding development of technologies that pushed the boundaries of human capability. The announcement that Marcus was about to make would cement TouchCode's legacy, while opening entirely new frontiers for tactile computing. After months of secretive development and testing, Quantum Dynamics was ready to unveil TouchCode Neural, a brain-computer interface that could translate thoughts directly into tactile experiences without any physical interaction whatsoever. The technology represented the culmination of Amanda's neural interface research, combined with 5 years of TouchCode refinement and optimization. Early testing had produced results that bordered on science fiction. Paralyzed patients could manipulate virtual objects with their thoughts, feeling texture, weight, and resistance through direct neural feedback. Children with severe motor disabilities could paint digital masterpieces by imagining brushstrokes, with TouchCode Neural translating their intentions into tactile art that they could feel and modify in real time. Most remarkably, the system could create shared tactile experiences, allowing multiple users to collaborate in virtual environments where they could touch and manipulate the same objects regardless of their physical locations. The implications extended far beyond medical applications. Educational institutions were already experimenting with touch code neural for immersive learning experiences that engaged multiple senses simultaneously. Architects could walk through virtual buildings before construction began, feeling the texture of proposed materials and the flow of spaces. Engineers could test product designs by manipulating virtual prototypes that provided realistic tactile feedback about stress points, material properties, and ergonomic characteristics. The development of touch code neural had required unprecedented collaboration between neuroscientists, computer engineers, and ethicists. The technology raised profound questions about privacy, consent, and the boundaries between human consciousness and artificial systems. Quantum dynamics had worked closely with bioethics committees and disability rights organizations to ensure that neural interfaces enhanced human autonomy rather than creating new forms of dependence or vulnerability. Dr. Robert Chen, the world's leading expert in neural privacy protection, had joined the touch code team specifically to address these ethical challenges. His background in both computer security and neuroscience made him uniquely qualified to develop safeguards against unauthorized access to users' thoughts or memories. Touch code neural incorporated multiple layers of encryption and user consent protocols that made involuntary neural monitoring virtually impossible. The demonstration that followed Marcus's introduction left the audience speechless. Maria Santos, a young woman who had been born without arms, used touch code neural to sculpt a three-dimensional artwork using only her thoughts. The sculpture materialized on screen as her neural signals were translated into precise movements within a virtual clay medium. She could feel the clay's resistance, adjust its texture, and even sense the ambient temperature of her virtual workspace through direct neural feedback. As Maria worked, her concentration was absolute, her face showing the same focused intensity that traditional sculptors displayed when working with physical materials. The artwork that emerged was stunning, a flowing abstract form that seemed to capture movement and emotion in ways that conventional sculpture couldn't achieve. When she finished, the audience erupted in applause, but Maria was still immersed in the virtual environment, running her mental fingers over the surface of her creation to ensure every detail met her artistic vision. The second demonstration featured Dr. James Mitchell, Amanda's brother who had become one of touch code neural's most accomplished beta testers. James used the neural interface to perform complex mathematical calculations by manipulating virtual objects that represented numerical concepts. Equations became three-dimensional structures that he could feel and modify, transforming abstract mathematical relationships into tangible experiences that enhanced his problem-solving abilities. James's mathematical work had already produced breakthrough insights in theoretical physics, with his tactile approach to equations revealing patterns that traditional analysis had missed. Several universities had begun incorporating touch code neural into their advanced mathematics programs, finding that the tactile representation of abstract concepts significantly improved student comprehension and retention. The technology's impact on education was perhaps its most transformative application. Traditional learning relied heavily on visual and auditory information, leaving tactile and kinesthetic learners at a disadvantage. Touch code neural provided new pathways for understanding complex concepts across all disciplines. History students could walk through virtual reconstructions of ancient civilizations, feeling the texture of period clothing and the weight of historical artifacts. Chemistry students could manipulate molecular structures with their thoughts, sensing the forces that held atoms together and the energy changes that occurred during chemical reactions. Dr. Sarah Kim had evolved from haptic researcher to chief education officer, overseeing touch code's integration into curricula worldwide. Her work with pilot programs in 50 schools across 20 countries had produced remarkable results. Students using touch code neural showed significant improvements in spatial reasoning, problem-solving abilities, and creative thinking compared to control groups using traditional teaching methods. The most unexpected benefit of touch code neural was its impact on human empathy and social connection. Shared tactile experiences created bonds between users that transcended physical limitations and cultural differences. International collaboration projects brought together students from different continents to work on virtual construction projects, scientific experiments, and artistic endeavors that required genuine cooperation and communication. The Touch Code Foundation had grown into one of the world's largest technology accessibility organizations, with programs in over 100 countries. The foundation's work extended beyond providing devices to underserved communities, encompassing research, education, and advocacy for universal design principles that made technology accessible to all users regardless of their abilities or disabilities. Sophia's leadership of the foundation had transformed it from a charity organization into a catalyst for systemic change. Her speeches at international conferences combined technical expertise with passionate advocacy for inclusive design. At 18, she possessed a unique perspective on both the possibilities and responsibilities that came with breakthrough technology. The economic impact of touch code had exceeded all projections. The tactile computing industry that had emerged around quantum dynamics. Innovations employed over 200,000 people worldwide. Dozens of companies had built entire business models around touch code applications, creating an ecosystem of innovation that generated billions of dollars in economic activity while improving millions of lives. Competition had intensified as other technology giants recognized the potential of tactile computing. Apple, Google, and Microsoft had all launched competing platforms, but touch code maintained its market leadership through continuous innovation and unwavering commitment to accessibility. The company's open-source approach had fostered a community of developers who contributed improvements and applications that kept touch code ahead of proprietary alternatives. The patent disputes that had plagued touch code's early years had largely been resolved through licensing agreements and collaborative development partnerships. Quantum Dynamics had chosen to license its core technologies broadly rather than maintaining strict exclusivity, a decision that accelerated industry growth while ensuring that touch code's benefits reached as many users as possible. Marcus's personal transformation paralleled touch code's evolution from assistive device to universal platform. The grief-stricken father who had channeled his desperation into innovation had become a respected leader in both technology and accessibility advocacy. His marriage to Dr. Sarah Kim 2 years earlier had created a partnership that strengthened both their personal lives and professional collaboration. The wedding had been a celebration of both love and achievement, with touch code users from around the world contributing tactile artwork that decorated the ceremony venue. Sophia had served as maid of honor, her speech describing how Sarah had become not just a stepmother, but a true partner in the family's mission to expand human possibility through technology. The announcement of touch code neural marked the beginning of a new chapter in tactile computing, but it also represented the fulfillment of promises made during those dark early days when Marcus and Sophia faced an uncertain future. The technology that had begun as one man's desperate attempt to help his daughter had evolved into a platform that was transforming human capability and connection on a global scale. As the presentation concluded and the audience rose in sustained applause, Marcus looked out at faces representing every continent and industry. Technology executives, disability advocates, medical researchers, educators, and government officials all understood that they had witnessed the unveiling of something that would reshape their fields in fundamental ways. The media response was immediate and overwhelming. Technology publications hailed touch code neural as the most significant interface innovation since the invention of the computer mouse. Medical journals praised its potential for rehabilitation and enhancement applications. Educational magazines explored its implications for learning and cognitive development. Even mainstream news outlets recognized that tactile computing had reached a tipping point that would affect society in ways that were only beginning to be understood. The waiting list for touch code neural beta access extended to over 10,000 applicants within hours of the announcement. Research institutions, hospitals, and schools submitted detailed proposals for pilot programs that would test the technology's applications in real-world environments. Individual users shared personal stories about how touch code neural could transform their lives, from artists seeking new forms of expression to professionals hoping to enhance their work capabilities. Regulatory approval for touch code neural would require extensive clinical trials and safety studies, but the initial response from agencies around the world was cautiously optimistic. The 5 years of touch code's commercial success had established trust in quantum dynamics, commitment to user safety, and ethical development practices. The celebration that evening brought together everyone who had contributed to touch code's journey, from desperate experiment to global platform. Marcus raised a toast to Elena's memory, acknowledging that their breakthrough had been built on foundations of love, loss, and determination that she had helped establish. Sophia spoke about the future with excitement and confidence, describing her plans to study neuroscience and continue pushing the boundaries of human-computer interaction. As the festivities wound down and colleagues departed, the core team gathered in Quantum Dynamics, original research lab where touch code had been conceived. The space had been preserved as both museum and inspiration, with the first prototype units displayed alongside photos documenting their development journey. Sarah pointed out that their greatest achievement wasn't technological, but human. They had proven that innovation driven by love and necessity could create solutions that benefited everyone, not just those who face specific challenges. TouchCode's evolution from assistive technology to universal platform demonstrated that inclusive design produced better outcomes for all users. Marcus reflected on the path that had brought them to this moment. From the sterile hospital room where he had held Sophia's hand, to this celebration of global impact. The grief that had nearly destroyed him had been transformed into purpose that gave meaning to Elena's memory and hope to millions of families facing their own challenges. Sophia, now preparing to leave for Stanford University where she would study both computer science and cognitive neuroscience, embodied the success of their mission. The frightened child who had woken up to a world of darkness had become a confident young woman who saw possibilities where others perceived limitations. As they prepared to leave the lab that had been the birthplace of TouchCode, Marcus took one last look at the prototype units that had started everything. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities as TouchCode Neural began its journey from announcement to implementation. But tonight, surrounded by the people who had shared their vision and worked to make it reality, Marcus felt the quiet satisfaction of promises kept and dreams exceeded. The future stretched ahead with unlimited potential, filled with applications and innovations that none of them could fully imagine. TouchCode had grown from a father's desperate love into a platform that was reshaping human possibility, proving that breakthrough innovation emerged not from corporate laboratories, but from human need, determination, and the belief that technology should enhance rather than limit human potential. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.